When We Speak, Volume 6. So yes, welcome to When We Speak, Volume 6. This is our fourth online volume. My name is Ripon Ray, hosting on behalf of Toynbee Hall. During this session, my mic will be on and so will Sharan, our guest this evening. Please put your mic on mute. Just so you know, there are more than 50 people, or at least 50, more or less, on this call. By putting your mic on mute, you can actually hear Sharan and myself clearly. But the chat is open and being checked by us, so please use that space to feed in your experiences, thoughts, and ask your questions. We shall do our best to get your questions answered. We're also recording the session, so please turn your cameras off if that genuinely worries you. Today, we'll explore South Asian communities and no doubt controversial topics around mental health, sexuality, and identity. We hope you'll also learn from Sharan on how to run the extremely successful magazine, Burnt Roti. Let me tell you briefly about When We Speak. When We Speak is a program run by the charity Toynbee Hall, and it is about shifting the balance of power so that young people like yourselves can influence change on your own, no doubt, terms. The program is for everyone, but recognizes that systematic oppression does play a part in how possible it is to influence change, and it invests in you in that awareness in mind. Toynbee Hall provides a learning program through these volumes that are open to everyone and then supports a tiny number of young people on every year to develop their idea with coaching, mentoring, access to spaces and financial help to test your idea. In volumes like the one you're attending this evening, we seek to do two things. First, learn about a subject area that is important to social justice and learn from individuals doing great work in this area about how they balance the social justice needs in their work with their own need to rest, gain strength, and have time to invest in their own well-being and happiness. And second, we want our future leaders to develop their potential without damaging their own well-being. So all our learning opportunities focus on both professional skills and developing personal strength. Today's volume will focus on the work of Burnt Roti and its CEO, Sharan. Now, I'm going to hand over to Sharan to introduce herself and her work.
Thank you so much, Ripon. That's lovely. So hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to this talk. My name is Sharan Dhaliwal. I'm the editor of Burnt Roti magazine. It's, I guess, a South Asian platform for young people. Well, for all people, not young people. I think it started as a place for young people, but it's a platform for South Asians to discuss anything that they want to talk about. That ranges from identity to mental health to sexuality, and to sexual health as well. We cover as many topics as possible. So I've been running that for about 4 years now, I would say.
Can I hear?
I'm back.
Yeah? Perfect,
my
that's it.
connection just went a bit funny. I'm really sorry, but I'm
That's
back.
not a problem. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry about that, everyone. I have a really weird Wi-Fi, which decides to just cut off whenever it feels like it. So I think I was talking about Middlesex Pride. Yeah, so I started it because I wanted to create a space for people that grew up in that area, which is a largely immigrant area, to feel safe and to have conversations with families and have a space for like educating and learning about sexuality. I'm also the creator of Oh Queer Cupid, which is a queer speed dating and comedy night for all genders, all sexualities, all races, to do like speed dating and then watch comedy after. I just thought it'd be a fun thing. I'm also an author and journalist. and just all round creative. I do social media for a few places as well. So I guess I want to talk about Burnt Roti specifically, like ignore the other things. So Burnt Roti was actually born out of a need for me to talk about things that I felt like I wasn't really able to talk about. And I really wanted to get into writing quite a lot. Like I used to write a bit, but I didn't really know where to go for that. But I wanted to talk about body hair as like a woman of color. I wanted to talk about being bilingual and like how there are certain words that I pronounce slightly off, as people have said before, because I grew up in a household that spoke, as my friends call it, Pinglish, which is Punjabi English. So I wanted to discuss these kind of things, and I didn't really have anywhere to go for it. So I kind of woke up one day and I was just like, well, try starting a magazine. Like, you're not doing anything with your life, Sharan. So I just started a crowdfunder, and I managed to do the first issue of Burnt Roti. And it was really fascinating at the time because I didn't realize I was carving a space that wasn't just for me. So initially it was something that I wanted. I wanted a space where I could talk about things. And then I realized quickly that it was actually a space for all the other people out there that didn't have that as well. Like all those other people out there wanted to talk about this stuff as well, and they didn't know where to go. It wasn't just me. And so Burnt Roti kind of became quite a thing. Like it was more than I expected. I thought maybe my mum would buy it and that's it. And she didn't, by the way. But it became quite popular. And it was because I realized as well, it wasn't just because there wasn't a platform for people to talk about things. It was a shared experience. It was somewhere that people could like talk to each other. And that included it included the events that we did. So we did loads and loads of events. And like, so we've collaborated with a V&A, we collaborated with Tate, we've worked with Adidas, we've worked with quite a few places. And those kind of spaces allowed other South Asian people that wanted to talk about identity or sexuality or anything like that to come together in those spaces in person and know that all the other people around them have the same kind of feelings and understandings. So it became a lot more than I thought it would. And I've been told off for saying this before, but it was initially a selfish idea. It was a selfish decision to create it. But I've been told to stop saying that. So I won't say it was selfish. But it's kind of, it became this important kind of place for people to feel kind of comfort, I guess. And then when I came out in an article in my magazine, and that kind of helped create a safe space for queer people as well, because it wasn't just a platform that ran campaigns on Pride Month or whatever. It was run by someone that was queer and that was open about it. So then it became a safe space for that as well. So what we've been doing at Burnt Roti is releasing print issues annually, and then we have digital content online as often as possible. And I always say we, but I want to emphasize that I run Burnt Roti on my own. So you will see things like a big gap in content coming out, and it's because I'm doing something else and I don't have time to do those things. So unfortunately, it's not a big team, like one person's running this and one person's running that. So even though we want to be as kind of like visible online as possible, we won't have as much content coming out when we're working on, like, for example, the print issue, which is something that I wanted to talk about now. So like we have our print issue coming out next month, fingers crossed. I'm waiting for a couple more things to come in and then I'm sending it off to print. And the next issue is on anti-Blackness in the South Asian community. And it was we were meant to do it last year, so we missed 1 year's print run. And we didn't do it last year because we didn't have the funding for it. And so this year, when I ran a crowdfunder, it coincided with everything that happened this summer. And I think with everything that happened, a lot of people kind of became a lot more conscious of the kind of conversations that needed to be had. And it became like we didn't hit our crowdfunder goal, but we got enough to be able to create this magazine. And so in the magazine that's coming out, we have a lot of conversations there. We have 4 mixed race creatives, that's a tongue twister, who are the cover stars as well, and they have essays penned in the magazine discussing certain experiences. We have Black writers as well talking about certain things. And then we also have like conversations around queer solidarity with like Black trans people. We have things about like the Dalit Panthers, which who were credited by the Black Panthers when they were created, about how to have solidarity at work. Like it's a really interesting magazine, because it's not something that, you know, you sit there and it's just yelling at you about, you know, oh, you're anti-Black or anything like that. It's kind of a place to go to learn more about history, to understand other people's, I guess, other people's experiences that you probably wouldn't have the chance of hearing in these kind of platforms, because Burnt Roti is essentially a South Asian platform, and we have mostly talked about identity for South Asians, but now we're talking about an issue where I've actually been told that I shouldn't be talking about, or Burnt Roti shouldn't be talking about, and that kind of instigates a reason to talk about it more, I guess. So yeah, the next issue will be coming out next month, and it's a vital conversation, because it is just essentially the start of a conversation around anti-Blackness, and why that is prevalent in our community. And we talk about the historical reasons behind it as well, and certain communities that still live in India and Pakistan, who are Black communities, and the kind of like discrimination they faced, and why it come like historically as well. And I find that a lot of the kind of excuses, I guess, to anti-Blackness goes to colonialism, but it is way before then, and that's something that we kind of bring to light as well. So yeah, so I guess that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. The kind of essence behind Burnt Roti is not just a platform of South Asians to be South Asian, if that makes sense, because obviously we had like Bollywood magazines and Asiana and things like that, but I had nothing of reference really to my own identity in that sense, because I didn't want to look at wedding lehengas, and I didn't want to look at articles about Bollywood. Like I do watch Bollywood, but I didn't really care for the magazines. So it kind of is a space to create that, a space where we can be ourselves in a really authentic way, without being stereotyped as people that like Bollywood, or just about food, or just about, you know, weddings. Because we are a lot more well-rounded, a lot more interesting, a lot more nuanced than just those stereotypes. And so out of that, the conversation that needs to be had isn't just that, you know, we are, for example, me, British Indian, and how do you navigate that and stuff. It's also about looking inward, and then how do we move forward as a community after looking inward into yourself. Because as a lot of us know, one of the biggest things that holds us back as a community is discrimination and racism. And so when that's faced, then we can move forward as a community. So that's one of the big things that Burnt Roti's a part of and doing. And then further down the line after that, there's going to be, hopefully when the world opens up again, events off the back of it. So we've already had an event called with Genesis Cinema, watching the film Mississippi Masala. I don't know if many of you have heard of it. If you haven't, I urge you to try and find it and watch it. It's very difficult to find. I had to get like a DVD from like Portugal or something. But it's a film made in the early 90s, 96 I think it was, and it's about an Indian woman and a Black man and them getting together. And it's a really interesting take on immigration and mixed race people and interracial relationships, and how like all communities react to that. And it was a really fascinating film, and we had a panel afterwards where we talked about it. But we're going to have more events similar to that after the magazine comes out. Again, fingers crossed, when the world returns to normal. If not, we can try and sort out some digital stuff. But yeah, so that's Burnt Roti, and that's kind of our next issue, and that's kind of the way we're working towards it. Because one of the things as well with Burnt Roti is we kind of want to, well, the Burnt Roti is my project, but it's not me, essentially, and that's one of the main things as well. So like the platform is used by other people, I just publish it, and that's one of the things that I wanted Burnt Roti to be a big part of, especially when it came to conversations around anti-Blackness, is me as a light-skinned North Indian Punjabi with the privilege I have. I don't really have those like a space in that kind of area to have that conversation, but there's so many people that need that space to have that conversation. And so Burnt Roti's I guess goal is to continue that as much as possible and further that kind of development of like, you know, South Asian politics, activism, and kind of understanding history and things like that. So after this issue, I guess, you know, watch out for the next one. I'm not sure what it's about yet, but we'll find out, I guess. But yeah.
Wow, well, thank you, Sharan. Guys, obviously she has explained a great deal when it comes to discrimination, her experience, and no doubt Burnt Roti. You must have lots of questions to ask her to get your head clear. And also, if she kind of encourages you to do your own thing, please, here's your chance.
Absolutely. And I think like one of the things I was going to say as well, which I completely forgot, when I started the magazine, I knew nothing about creating a magazine. I'm not, and well, I am now, but I was never a magazine editor. I never knew how to do any of that stuff. I mean, Google's a great tool. I Googled everything. Luckily, I had a bit of design history because like I do art and illustration. So I was able to like off the back of that, do some like work off the back of it. But, you know, I created it off like no real knowledge. And I think that's really fascinating because I see a lot of people doing that. You don't really need a degree in something. You don't need to be kind of taught something professionally when you can teach it yourself. I taught myself most of the stuff I know. And so the ability for people to be able to create something, it's at your fingertips now. And I think having a digital world there where the internet is just like almost a dark hole of information, it's there's never really anything holding you back from being able to create something, whether it's something large or something small, whether it's like a small design that you want to put together and just hand out to people or whatever. Like, you know, there's always a chance to learn something. There's no hindrance there about like education.
Sure, but tell us your chain of thought. Just tell us, you know, first time you sat down, you got the idea, you sat down and you wrote something and you went on your website. What was the first, let's say, print online, and tell us the process of you going through? What were you thinking? How did it evolve? How did you attract audience?
Well, that's the thing with Burnt Roti, which I found fascinating, and it was organic, essentially. So usually I would have to kind of understand the world of marketing and PR to be able to get something off the ground, and I don't understand that at all. But with Burnt Roti, because I already had a personal profile online, and it wasn't big or anything, but it was enough to be able to get some people in. But Burnt Roti filled a hole in the kind of not just publishing world, but just in the world. And I think there was a lack of space, especially in the UK, for South Asian people, specifically South Asian women, to have certain conversations about things that were stigmatized, that they didn't feel safe to say in other spaces. And so I think it was mostly through word of mouth. It was word of mouth. It was through my own personal kind of like, everyone follow Burnt Roti, kind of like telling people. And it did kick off. And that's the kind of value of like finding something that's so niche. When you find something, I mean, if you do your research, and that's one thing that I lucked out because I didn't do any research. I was just, like I said, we'll stop saying selfish. I just wanted to talk about myself, and I didn't really do the research into it. But like, if there is someone that does research and sees that there is a gap in the market about something in particular that relates to them that they want to talk about, when they fill that gap, people will come running because you're not the only person that wants that gap filled. There's a reason the gap's there for you to fill it. Otherwise, you know, there would be nowhere for anyone to sit, but there's so many spaces there that can be filled. So as soon as you do, other people will come running and just have a look at what you're doing. But yeah, definitely research into like, you know, the best kind of things to start and what kind of niche audience do you want to reach out to.
I mean, in terms of a niche audience that you want to reach out to, what advice would you actually give to any newcomer who's thinking about having a platform like you have? What would you tell them?
I mean, I think one of the things that I wish I did was have more people working with me on it. When your project or your idea is slightly bigger than you can maybe handle, or has more elements to it than just your own expertise, then bring on other people with the same kind of mindset as you that want to have the same passion for that project as well. And I think team collaboration, not just for like, you know, bouncing ideas off each other, but also skill sets, because there's only so much I understand or can do. I cannot do accounting, I can't act, so I kind of messed that up. And like I said, marketing and PR isn't like my greatest skill, and if I had these people brought on board, then I'm assuming Burnt Roti would be a lot different now, but 4 years on, it is still just me and just my limited expertise, so it's only reached that certain kind of level that it's reached now, and it's taken that long. So I would definitely say, like, you know, bring on more people, you know, don't do what I did where I was like, it's my baby kind of thing, you know. It's a shared kind of idea, and it's shared because there's other people out there that have the same feeling as you, and so yeah, definitely do that. One thing I did as well was reach out to people with big followings that I knew and be like, oh, can you like tell people about this? Do you want to like retweet it or like put it up on your Instagram stories, or do you want to just tell people, like actually go up to someone and say, have you heard of this magazine? Or like, if it ever comes up, if someone ever says like, you know, oh, I want to read something South Asian and there's nothing South Asian, tell them about Burnt Roti. And so like when you place that in people's heads, it sticks there, because again, there wasn't many places for people to go that were South Asian platforms. So when someone said to him, oh, is there anything South Asian, you know, that I could read, they would say Burnt Roti. And so through word of mouth like that, it would kind of travel around.
Jasmine, who's asking, what was the hardest challenge to overcome?
The hardest challenge was my ego, I think. So yeah, no, most definitely. And I think everyone has that in them. It's a learning experience. It's most definitely a learning experience. Like I said, there's only so much I know, and with the privilege I come in with as well, Burnt Roti was very different at the start to what it is now. Very, very different. And the reason it's changed is because I've sat down and I've had conversations and I've learned through people. And I haven't, at first, my initial reaction, like anyone's initial reaction to any kind of criticism or any kind of like, not just criticism, but someone saying, maybe my initial reaction is, it's my thing, how dare you? But like, you know, when the reason people are saying that is because they also want to be recognized. And if they're not recognized, then your platform is meaningless, you know? So I got to a stage where I was just like, okay, I need to stop thinking about it as my thing. It's something I created for other people. And so if I listen to what they want, then more people would come and be part of it. And so I had to overcome myself, basically. And I've learned a lot about my privilege. I've learned a lot about history, politics. And I've taught myself, like I said, the internet's amazing. I've read up so many things, so many theses, articles, and just having like conversations with people, just having a chat, you know?
I've got another question from Priyanka. Is there any way to get involved in writing for Burnt Roti?
Oh yeah, we take submissions all the time. But like I said at the beginning, like it's a one-person team, and at the moment we're working on the print issue, and I'm working on like 3 other projects as well. So I'm very slow at replying. So if people have submitted and they haven't had a reply yet, it's because it's there and it's like saved to be read, but I'm very slow at the moment. But yeah, just submit a pitch. Basically, just email me a pitch at sharan.daliwal@burntroti.com. Email me a pitch, and we can have a discussion from there. And then, yeah, definitely submit 100%.
There we are. Definitely submit. I've got a question from Aisha. What date is the new issue out next month? And is Burnt Roti accepting contribution pitches at the moment? And is there a limit? Is it limited only in the UK? I know there's 3 separate questions for one person. First one is, what date is the new issue out next month?
So there isn't a date yet. Okay. That's because there's a couple of things coming in, and I haven't pressured anyone because of the world we're living in. Everyone's kind of struggling at the moment. So I'm kind of giving loads of people leeway in them handing stuff in. So it's likely going to be mid-December, I would say. And then like contributions, it's all filled at the moment because there's a certain amount of pages that basically I can afford for print. So I've reached those pages limitations. So there's no more that I can accept, unfortunately. And it's going to be available. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Carry on.
Oh, it's going to be available online and shipped everywhere around the world.
Yeah, so you kind of really answered her second question, which is Burnt Roti accepting contribution pitches at the moment? And is it limited to the UK? But obviously you said it's online. You can always get it wherever you are, really. But tell me more about Burnt Roti. How did you get to the title? Because that in itself kind of inflames. Burnt, isn't it? Think about it.
Yeah, so there's a reason I used Burnt Roti. So basically, I'm pretty sure a lot of Asian women would kind of like appreciate this, and just Asian people just know about this. A lot of women are kind of taught to cook from a very young age, and the reasoning behind it is so that you can cook for your husband, essentially. Oops. Let's turn you into the best cook so your husband's happy. And it always starts with a roti. You have to make the perfect round roti. That's kind of how it starts. And when I was young, I was just, my mum hated me. I was just so mean. So she would stand there and she'd be like, make a roti. And I'd just be like, nah, and it would never round. I would just do different like continents and stuff like that. And then essentially I would just burn them. It would be my first, I call it my first kind of like form of activism. I would burn my rotis on purpose. And it was because I kind of rejected the idea that I had to make a perfect roti to like please anyone. And I was like, I'll just eat the burnt roti. I don't care. And eventually my mum was just like, oh, whatever, like sit back down. You obviously will never learn how to cook, and I was like, yeah. So I get to sit down with my brother and just watch my mum instead. But yeah, that was essentially why it started. And it was kind of like a note towards like, having a form of activism without even kind of realizing, I think. And that's kind of like what Burnt Roti became, because at first, like I said, it was because I wanted to talk about stuff, and then it became quite a strong form of activism. And yeah, so just burnt my rotis, ate some burnt rotis as well. They're quite nice. Didn't mind them.
Well, how about this one then? So with your journey, what sort of things did you discover whilst you were establishing and have established Burnt Roti?
Say that again, sorry.
What sort of things, what new things did you discover whilst you were exploring through Burnt Roti?
Like culturally, or just through the world of publishing? Or
tell us more about publishing, also culturally.
Publishing. So I guess like one of the biggest things in the world of publishing, and I guess this is talked about quite a lot, is the buzzword diversity. So I noticed a lot that Burnt Roti was kind of picked out a lot to be the spokespeople of South Asians, essentially, to tick boxes for diversity. And then if they didn't have a quota to fill for diversity for South Asian people, then we weren't looked at or considered for anything. So I found it quite interesting that because I didn't really reach out to places. When I collaborated with brands or with institutes or anything like that, they reached out to me, and that's because I later realized that they wanted to fill a certain quota. And it felt a bit, it was double-edged. It was a shame at first, because I was like, well, you should be including these voices no matter what. And then it was also but I'm glad that we can have our voices out there. Even though you are ticking a box that makes you look good, it's still putting people out there, and it's still putting those voices out there. So it was kind of this weird balance of just trying to figure out, is it worth it? Are people going to get something? Is there going to be a benefit for the community from doing this? Or are we just helping this organization look good? And so that's something that I've had to figure out a lot in the world of like, not just publishing, but working with brands and things like that. And so at the moment, we have this massive thing happening in publishing where, they're trying to be more diverse, and they're talking about having more voices from all different cultures. And again, it kind of feels like a tick box, like, it kind of feels a bit like we need more voices because we've been told we're really bad at publishing. And it's like, yeah, did you need to be told that? These statistics have been around for years and years. Like, you've known this for a long time, but now that, it's being put in the forefront, now you're making a big deal about it. And so I find I get kind of emails, and I get kind of people like questioning me about certain things. I get people asking me to be a consultant on certain things that is specifically South Asian now, instead of ever before in my life. And it kind of worries me a bit because I don't know the balance. So it's kind of learning that and understanding that, like, where is the line? Where is the line where you are helping someone or you're just helping an organization look good?
Okay.
So it's an ongoing kind of learning process. And I don't think there's any real answer to that or any real solution to it, because we don't live in a kind of world where, I guess, marginalized people get the chance to have that kind of a solution. But it's, I guess it comes with your own ethics and morals. So you kind of balance out how that works.
I mean, morally speaking, though, I mean, how do you feel morally in terms of others, in a sense, using you to fill the quota, but also, let's be honest, you're also using them to make sure you're out there. There is an element of give and take. But what if someone is concerned that, okay, why are they using me simply because of my ethnicity rather than actually my talent? What response would you give them?
I mean, I've given many responses in the past. If only you lot could see my emails, dear God. I tend to call people out quite a lot, in a very kind of, let's say, professional way. I ask questions. So if I get asked to do something specifically, where I feel like I'm being kind of used for my ethnicity or for my sexuality only, instead of like for the fact that they want to hear what I have to say, do they want me for the fact that it ticks boxes, or do they want me because what I have to say is valuable? So I end up asking them, like, who else have they brought on to be in this project? And kind of, I guess I kind of look at what kind of boxes are ticked in that sense. If I'm the only queer South Asian, I ask them, I say, like, are you bringing me on because I'm a queer South Asian, or do you find what I have to say valuable? A lot of the time it's during phone calls, and people are really open. And some people are just like, we have to tick certain boxes, but we found you and we found you really interesting. And I'm like, nah, that makes me feel quite uncomfortable, So it's having that conversation. You shouldn't shy away from those kind of I no longer shy away from those kind of conversations. And that's because it's important for me, and it's important for the way I look as well, because I don't want to look like some kind of person that's just selling her soul to like work with certain brands and with certain people. Like, I want to do things that are valuable, that are helpful, not just to the community, but to me and my mental health as well. So I have to ask the hard questions, and I do get the answers I expect a lot of the time. There's a lot of things I've turned down, but there's a lot of things I have worked with, and it's because we've had an honest and open conversation about it.
Thank you. I've got a question from Suman Butchard. Do you think it's better to be a diversity hire, or for there to be no diversity at all in the organization?
I think they're both bad. See, I just don't think these kind of big brands and organizations should really exist. I think it all should be independent organizations that are kind of government funded. I don't like businesses and companies. God, I sound awful. But they're all led by, it's all based on wealth inequality. It's all led by cis white men. It's all kind of like the establishment itself, the structure, the power structure, in fact, it will never benefit you as an individual person. It will never benefit you. It will always benefit them. So whether they hire you to tick a box, or they hire you because, like, I don't know, because you're good at your job or whatever, like, you're still part of something that is not there to benefit you. And in my ideal world, in my utopia, everything is independently run, and it's independently run by people that have historically never had the power to run things before. And that's a completely different society than we can ever imagine. Like, we wouldn't be living in this world that we're living in at the moment. But outside of my utopia, I mean, I've been hired off the back of a diversity hire many times. And I did it to take the money. I did it to take the money so I could fund Burnt Roti. I told him, like, in the interview, I was like, oh, I run a magazine and I'm doing this job because I need to help fund the magazine. I was like, I'll turn up every day, I'd work hard, but know that my goal is this magazine. And they were like, oh, cool. a South Asian magazine. Oh, you must be so interesting. Oh, they were ticking so many boxes. They were loving it. They were loving it. They were like, oh, and queer. Oh my God. So they loved it. So yeah, I mean, I have been a diversity tick box hire, but I used them. I used them to get to where I wanted to get to. And that's essentially the only reason that they should exist at the moment, is to help us take that step further, to do our own thing and be independent.
I mean, I know we were talking about Burnt Roti, but obviously you as an individual, as a queer, as you said, what was life like personally growing up with that tag on your forehead, literally?
Well, I didn't come out until a couple of years ago, so that tag was invisible. Oh no, I say that.
But how do you deal
No,
with
it
it?
wasn't
I mean...
invisible when I was drunk. It was really strange. I think I felt really strange most of my childhood, and I thought it was because I had a certain taste in music, or like comic books, or like, you know, things like that. I was like, am I weird because I like listening to like Marilyn Manson and I read the X-Men? Like, is that why I'm weird? Is that why my mum is like, you're a freak to me and stuff like that? Like, why? And I couldn't get my head around the fact that sexuality was something that I needed to like not rediscover, but kind of like, I guess, just unlearn and learn, because I had it drilled into my system since I was like 12 that I had to marry a nice Punjabi man from a village somewhere that I'd never heard of, who was probably a doctor or something, and was probably a terrible person. I mean, most of these people that I've met that have been married off, like, they're all divorced now. So I don't see the point in that. But anyway, sorry, just ranting. It's like, any aunties that are listening, stop doing that. But like, I think because it was drilled into me from such a young age, I didn't have a chance to be able to discover that part of myself, and it really manifested in my mental health quite a lot. So I deal with a lot of, like, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have insomnia, I've grown up with eating disorders, and it's all because of these kind of pressures onto being the person that is expected of me, and that included being a straight person. And I think when I got to the stage when I did come out, it was already kind of fairly well known to like all of my friends, but like, it wasn't something that I was really embracing until I actually came out. I wasn't fully embracing that lifestyle, that kind of like idea of myself, and I felt like there was a big part of me missing. I felt like I was covering it up by doing all the work I was doing instead of actually just existing my true self. And then when I came out, I was just like, oh, thank God. Like, it just felt like, oh, I can finally breathe. And then I was able to kind of like live the kind of life I wanted, where I could work as hard as I was working on the things I wanted to talk about and still be my true self with my sexuality. Just know that that lives in me and that lives happily. It was quite a journey, I think.
I mean, you can still understand that a lot of young people are still worried about coming out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to that person, really?
I mean, there's no pressure in coming out. Like, I came out when I was 34. There's no pressure in coming out. Just, I think the biggest thing that affected me was my mental health. And I think if you are feeling those kind of pressures where it does affect your mental health, then seek help where you can. Now, I know there's a massive stigma around seeking help in the South Asian community, but there is a lot of resources out there that are quite private and quite kind of anonymous. I have them in my auto reply, my signature. What I can do is I can send it to you guys to like share it out to everyone. But there's quite a few resources, quite a few organizations, people that you can reach out to have a little conversation with. But there's absolutely no pressure in coming out at all. You don't have to, you don't actually ever have to come out if you don't want to. I think it's just mostly for yourself a lot of the time. And if you want to be part of like activist groups or organizations, I have a lot of people that work with me that aren't out, but come on board as allies, you know, and it kind of helps them support themselves as well as supporting the community. So there's like loads of different ways you can be part of the community. There's different ways that you can exist in the way that you feel true to yourself without putting yourself in harm. but I definitely would recommend reaching out to people if you do feel like it could harm your mental health.
Do you know in what way it's different from, I suppose, a man queer and a female queer? See what I mean? Is there a difference in terms of behavior and attitude in the context of, I suppose, community and family?
Oh, so right.
Yeah.
I guess because there's a lot of slut shaming that comes with women, South Asian women in the community. When a South Asian woman is kind of out as queer, it's looked at as, well, she just wants to fuck everyone. She just wants to sleep with everyone.
Sorry.
So there's a lot of kind of slut shaming that comes on the woman's side of things, and I think historically with the men's side, it's mostly been kind of related to HIV/AIDS. So a lot of that is to do with disease. So there's kind of different viewpoints. There's kind of women are kind of I guess looked at in a way where they should be controlled, and if they're unable to be controlled, that's because they're being that's when people are slut shaming them essentially. But with men, because there's no kind of need to control them, they're kind of free to be, in a sense. It became more about disease and spreading disease and causing disease. So those were kind of the main differences I saw, and I don't think that's specifically for South Asian communities. I think that's kind of global.
Got a question from Jasmine Bassi. What was your experience in community response when it came out?
Oh, it was amazing. So what I did is I published the article, and I kind of threw my laptop across the room and hid under 5 blankets, and I was like, oh god, no one talked to me. And then eventually I opened my laptop, and it was just it was amazing. There wasn't a single person, I don't think, unless I kind of blacked it out, there wasn't a single person that was mean to me. And I think it's because I had created a safe space with the magazine, and it was people from the magazine, the readers of the magazine, or my own followers on social that were responding to me. And it was just incredibly positive. I mean, I've obviously had some people since then that have been rude or said, homophobic things. But when I first came out, it was nothing but love, genuinely. And what was really interesting as well is my emails and my DMs were flooded by people saying, thank you for being visible, because it makes me feel like I can now be visible as well.
Got a question from Laura. How did you overcome criticisms and rigid cultural viewpoints from family and Asian aunties when talking about stigmatized topics?
Oh yeah, that's ongoing. So I'm 36 and I'm still being kind of put in those positions where I have to have those kind of conversations. Genuinely, it's so embarrassing. I ignore a lot of them. I don't want to be mean to them, but I find value in a lot of kind of, I guess, young people's viewpoints and their future and their ideals. And so I concentrate more on what they say, really. When someone from an older generation that wants to criticize, I'm kind of yeah, but you don't have that much long left, so but criticisms that come from them, they used to hurt. Those kind of criticisms used to hurt, because I grew up and a lot of South Asian people grew up with people that would criticize you, and it would hurt. Because they would do it in a particular way, and they'd give you that particular look that was terrifying. They can make scary movies out of that kind of evil look that aunties and mums give you. But it kind of got to a stage where I realized where the actual important work was, and it wasn't with what they were saying at all. Any kind of criticism that they have given me, and a lot of the time it goes through my mother and then comes to me, I just go, yeah, cool, I'm doing it, I don't care. And she's like, oh, how will it look? And I was like, well, it looks like this. So
Emma, actually, the organizer has told me something about your nose job. What's it all about?
Oh, yes. Okay. So
what's it all about?
What's that about? Oh God, you know what? I was going to say how many years it's been, but I genuinely can't remember how long it's been. It's quite a while ago. I had a nose job, and about 10 years after my nose job, again, I'm making up years, it was a lot less than that. I think it was 7 years.
Is it linked with insecurity or any of those things, or any other reasons?
So what actually happened is I had a hooked nose. I had what a lot of people would call a North Indian Punjabi nose. It was quite kind of like a thin, sharp, hooked nose. And I hated it, and it really affected my mental health, and it affected kind of the way that I literally wouldn't let anyone look at my profile. I was terrified. I was incredibly bullied at school. I was just, it was just a mess. And so I asked if I could have a nose job. Later did I find out that my mum had had a nose job and never told me, and I was like, oh my God, I thought this was dad's, but it's yours. And so they let me have one, and later kind of discovering the reason why they wanted me to be pretty enough to kind of marry off, but what happened out of that is I ended up having conversations around ethnic cleansing through plastic surgery. So I ended up talking about whether I was removing a part of my ethnicity and whether I was kind of adhering to beauty standards that weren't fit for me. And because I will never fit into those certain beauty standards, why was I trying so hard to fit into them? And so it kind of opened those gates as well. And I don't regret my nose job at all, because at that stage of my life, when I was that young and that vulnerable, it did help me. But looking back, it shouldn't have. I shouldn't have been put in that situation where something as drastic as a nose job should have helped me. And it's kind of unfair on people to have to think that, you have to take those kind of steps to be kind of wanted or loved, So yeah, I had that nose job. I had an interview with, there's a journalist, Robin Wilder Heritage, who did a piece in Cosmopolitan about ethnic cleansing through plastic surgery. And I spoke about it there. And then since then I did some BBC interviews and radio and stuff talking about it, and people were suddenly really, I guess, open to that conversation. And I think it was because during that time there was a lot of conversation about East Asia doing a lot of ethnic cleansing through plastic surgery as well. And so they kind of just were like, oh, what about South Asia as well? And just let's talk about them. And it kind of moved around, and would suddenly, that was a topic of conversation, and then very quickly they forgot about it and stopped caring. But it's still something I continue to talk about. I talk a lot about the fact that I was led to believe that I had to fit into certain beauty standards. And so I would make drastic changes to myself, whether it was facial hair, body hair, my nose job, laser eye surgery, so many things that I tried to do to fit into a standard that was not built for me and was never built for me.
Two questions from Karina. First one is, in your upcoming Burnt Roti issue about anti-Blackness, have any of your own perceptions and ideas about anti-Blackness in your community changed? That's one.
Yeah, most definitely. I think I kind of did a lot more reading, and I read a lot more about solidarity with South Asians and Black Lives Matter movements. A lot of them were within queer movements as well. I found that a lot of solidarity is within the most kind of discriminated groups. And so there was a lot of reading there that I learned a lot more about solidarity than I thought existed. And that included the Dalit Panthers that I didn't know about, which are still active to this day, which was really fascinating for me. Reading more about this kind of massive activist group that do so and have been around for a while and have done so much, but are just so unknown. I had never heard of them, and so yeah, there were loads of things that I'd learned. There's loads of kind of ideas as well, talking about solidarity in workplaces and how you navigate those kind of situations where you don't want to create harm, you don't want to create embarrassment, you don't want to, things like that. How to be a successfully good ally, I guess. There's so many different ideas and viewpoints about how to do it, and I guess it comes from so many different people as well. There's no one big Black experience that you can adhere to. There's so many different types of nuances about how you approach something, and so it's really fascinating learning about how you become an ally without being I'm going to do this one thing and that makes me a great ally. It's this massive whole process of understanding.
I mean, Karina kind of goes on to say, is there no hope for our community, or are you more optimistic after researching for the issue? Is there hope?
I mean, I don't think it's whether there's hope or not for the community. I think there's hope for generations. And I think, again, that's beyond race, ethnicity, and genders. I think there's hope in younger generations. And I think it's because of the digital age, it's because of how media has changed. It's because of independent voices that are out there. that younger people have now got a platform and have information where they can progress and move forward. So generationally, I think there is definitely change to happen and has happened and will continue to happen. It's a slow process because, again, the world is built to, discriminate against us, but it's definitely going to happen. It's definitely there. There's definitely progress. If you look back from 10 years till now, there's already progress. And I think within the South Asian community itself, we can see people that have immigrated out of India change a lot of viewpoints, but you can also see people in India that have activist groups that are organizing, that are doing protests, where change is actually happening there as well. It's not like those areas are kind of so backwards. They're making big distinctive changes as well. So there's definitely hope, I guess, but I think it's a global scale of everyone where there's hope.
I mean, just to kind of recap, I know we talked about, in fact, you talked about a couple of times around Black Lives Matter. I mean, what impact did that make on you?
As in the movement?
Yeah.
Their activity recently or their existence?
I mean, recently, don't get it, the whole Black Lives Matter movement really kicked off during lockdown, wasn't it? When we were meant to be locked in, but we're locked in, but we came out.
When we were meant to be locked in. So I've known of Black Lives Matter for a long time. One of my friends was a big part of the Black Lives Matter UK movement. And so I've kind of been very aware of kind of what happens with them, and they've been quite contested against, and there's been loads of kind of conversations about Black Lives Matter movements. But with what happened over summer, well, the kind of effect it had on me was it kind of instigated guilt in people that led to a crowdfunding of our magazine, because we tried to fund it last year and we got nothing. And then suddenly with all these protests, I think people felt guilt, felt like the conversation needed to happen, and suddenly we got funding, which is interesting in the sense that it's feels like we're taking money off the movement, which was kind of a horrible thing to try and get to terms with. But like I said, this magazine, this issue has been trying to come out for a while now, and it just feels like off the back of what happened, it was able to. But again, I made a really big point to say, if you are donating, I would rather donations from South Asians and non-Black people of color and white people.
Okay, but what was life like for you during the times of lockdown? This is more a generic one. How did you cope with lockdown?
Not well, to be honest. So my mental health went quite bad, because I do struggle with like anxiety and depression and insomnia and stuff, but it's manageable, when you're busy, when you've got stuff to do, when you can see your friends, when you're going to like 50 meetings a day or whatever. But when you're sitting there on your own with yourself, it's kind of those internal voices become external. And so it's very difficult to kind of navigate around that and work at the same time. When your home space is now your workspace, because I used to go to like coffee shops and like co-working spaces to do stuff. I can't work in my bedroom. Like, it's hell, honestly. I can't do anything here. So it was really difficult. It's very difficult being in lockdown and being able to be creative and being able to, just function, really. And I think that's a lot of people's experience. This has been an incredibly difficult time for a lot of people. And so there's been a lot of, like, I guess you see on Instagram a lot of kind of like, take care of yourself, a lot of self-love, make sure you do your stretches and your yoga. And it's like, thank God there's people out there that are reminding me, because otherwise I'd be just sitting there doing nothing for hours. So like, yeah, it's been difficult, but like, we evolve as humans to like, learn our new kind of surroundings and deal with what we have around us. And so we are kind of just like getting used to this, I guess, to be able to survive. And, I'm okay. I'm okay. I just wish I could go to a coffee shop and work, really. That's it.
Is there any more questions, guys? Or is that it? I think there is one actually from Karina. As well as productivity, did you struggle with the writer's block during lockdown? If so, any tips to combat it?
Oh yeah, I have so much writer's block. Yeah. I have writer's block right now, actually. I should be writing something and I'm just like sitting there. I wrote the word "the" and then wrote it, and I was just like, an hour has passed. Um, it's hard. It's hard. Usually what I used to do is change my surroundings. And so what I do now is trick myself into thinking my surroundings have changed. So I light incense or have a different smell. I change the lighting in my room. So I switch the lamps. And then I move to a different area and face a different part of my room. And that way I kind of trick myself into thinking I'm in a different space to be able to write. And that kind of helps sometimes. It doesn't always help. A lot of the time, writer's block is just something that, I find I have to overcome with a good night's sleep. But I think tricking myself into like different areas of my room does help occasionally.
Perfect. Any more questions? Karina is saying thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Lots of thank you. Yeah, well, I think on that note, it would be fair to say, I think let's call it a day. And please do stay in touch, Sharan. I think you're fantastic. But he's in more. No, actually, here's another one. As someone who has recently stepped into editorial role as freelance with limited experience, what would your favorite piece of advice would be?
I think, okay, nailing down your pitch. So if this is about pitching articles to like different editorials, I would really kind of, if I was given this advice, like I would have had a lot more stuff out a lot earlier. Really nail your pitch, understand how to write a good pitch. There's a lot of articles out there at the moment about how to write a good pitch, because bad pitches, they get ignored a lot. If the topic is good, if the pitch is bad, it will still get ignored. So nail your pitch, figure out how you're writing it. Oh, I just hit my laptop. How you're writing it, like introduce yourself, why you are the right person to talk about this subject matter, and then summarize the subject matter, then put in the stats and stuff, and then links to any kind of like information out there that you're going to take from. And that kind of thing, where you can like, the editor can kind of almost see the piece lined out without it written out. That if you nail that, then you will get like commissioned quite a lot. And I find that when my pitches got better, I got more stuff out there. When my pitches were like rubbish, everyone was ignoring me, and I was like, why? These are great ideas. And then I eventually learned that I had to nail my pitches.
Any more questions or advice that you want? I think that's probably it. Well, Sharan Dhaliwal, I must say that you've inspired me, in fact, believe it or not. You did. and your personality shows a lot. I think you made us feel, I don't know, ease. You have a strong personality as well. And obviously you're full of talent. So I must say I'm very grateful for just listening to you speak, really. I think you've been very inspirational. I hope a lot of people also have learned a great deal from this. But of course, anything best has always have to come to an end, unfortunately. So I would like to say on behalf of all the members here who've taken part, and no doubt on behalf of Toynbee Hall, I would like to say thank you for taking part and being our guest for tonight.
You're very welcome. I had loads of fun. I love talking.
Thank you. On that note, I'll